What's up, brothers? Hope everyone's doing well out there. One of the biggest problems in modern society is that both men and women have no stability. And I wanted to make this video because, well, it's the holidays, and if you're sitting around watching videos, you're probably single, right? And you're probably into this type of content. So I figured it'd be a good time to talk about this subject. Anyways, no stability. I know a lot of men want to blame women, modern women, and a lot of women want to blame modern men. But in reality, we're all sort of in this together, and we're all just sort of NPCs reacting to the circumstances that are thrown at us, if you think about it. Our daily decisions are sort of made for us in a way. We're given these specific set of opportunities, and we just follow accordingly. Anyways, no stability. Here's what I mean by this. In order for a man to be attractive in the eyes of women, or in order for a man to be able to take that step and become a husband and a father and have a relationship, he needs to have two forms of stability. And most men in my age group or younger don't have it. They don't have either. But these two forms of stability come, one, from your friends and family, right? Your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your cousins, your son, your daughter, your wife, your friends that actually care about you. The ones that would be there if you were in trouble. If something happened to you, they would be there for you. The ones that love you, right? That's where your social stability comes from. And a man has to have that in order for him to be worth anything in the modern dating market. Like, you have to have some form of that. That's where your masculine frame comes from. That's what you pull women into. When you meet a woman and you want to make her your girlfriend, you have to have stability in terms of your social circle, and you pull her into your frame and she becomes a part of that. So that's one form of stability. The second form of stability is more of like a professional or financial stability. And, this typically just comes from choosing a career, having direction. Having a specific direction that you want to go professionally, and, sticking with that. It doesn't necessarily have like a specific monetary value, or, it doesn't matter how much you make, but, you have to have direction. Maybe you work for a company that you plan on retiring at. You're comfortable working for that company for the next 20 years. So essentially, to some degree, professionally and financially, you're on autopilot. Right? So you have stability financially, professionally, and then you have stability from your family and your social circle, right? When you have those two things, it's like a work-life balance type thing, but when you have those two things, you're stable, right? You're going to be psychologically healthy, you're not going to be depressed. You're not going to be like, struggling and lonely and all that, right? You're going to have a pretty good life going for you. And in order for a man to even be visible in the eyes of women, he has to have really both of those, at least one of those. And most guys have neither one of those. And the reason why they have neither one of those is because essentially when you become an adult, you are given a choice to choose one of those. So what I mean by this is you can either stay in your hometown with your parents and your siblings and the people you grew up with, and just stay right there in the neighborhood and have no financial stability. Or you can pack up and move to a different city or a different state and, make a life of your own and have financial stability, but have no social stability, right? You're just like basically an outsider, a stranger. And that's the way the whole world is structured right now. Like, it's literally like that, and it's so bizarre. To give you an example, the gym that I go to, I kind of walk in, and they all know each other. Like, it's very strange because I walk in there, and they're all like just people that grew up with each other. They know each other's parents' names. They know each other's kids' names. They know details about each other. They have stories about each other, and little inside jokes that are going on all the time. And I'm sort of just an outsider, right? Like, sometimes they'll stare at me and like, They'll feel like I'm some sort of outsider threatening their territory. It's kind of bizarre, but yeah, I think you get what I'm saying, right? But they have that social stability, and I chose to move, right? So I'm sort of an outsider. And I think most men out there in this day and age, they're sort of choosing that path, right? They're choosing one or the other. Either you're still in your hometown and you have no money, no opportunity to buy a house, no career, you probably drink a lot, yeah, that's just your life, right? Or you decided to pack up and move and you're just like a loner, living some sort of a life. You're making good money, but what's it all for, right? Like you just have money and you just blow it on whatever, partying and stuff. Anyways, so modern men have no stability, and society is structured this way, right? It's just, if you want to move up in a company, let's say you get a college degree and you start out as a manager at Amazon or whatever company. Within, if you decide that you want to move up within the company, they're going to give you an opportunity, but you're going to have to move 700 miles away, right? And then 3 years later, if you want to move up again, they'll give you an opportunity, but you're going to have to move all the way to the other side of the country, another 900 miles in the opposite direction, right? And that's sort of how the modern market works. So if you choose like the professional and financial route, if you marry your high school sweetheart and she sticks by your side, you can sort of make it work and you can travel together. But most people are going to be stuck bouncing from one place to another, and that's sort of the life of the modern man. And modern women have no stability because theirs is different, okay? It's almost as if they do have masculine stability, like they have a masculine frame, but they don't have the stability that men are typically looking for. And that stability comes from little things like having the family recipe passed down to her that she cooks on the holidays, right? Like maybe there's some specific dish that they cook, in your local neighborhood or your local culture, where it's just something specific, right? And it's been passed down to her. She learned from her mother how to make this dish. And on the holidays and birthdays and things, family gets together and you celebrate by eating that dish, right? That's a form of stability that women typically would have had, right? And what's happening now is you see women choosing that same path as men. They can choose a professional route. And for women, it's really easy to sort of choose that, that social path as well. They can move to a different city. And, if it's a halfway decent, charming woman, it's not going to be hard for her to just be like, hey, I have no friends. I'm looking for some people to hang out with. And people just kind of embrace her and take her in. She's not an outsider that they're threatened by. They're not going to be territorial. They're just going to let her in. But the problem is, when a woman does that and she goes from social circle to social circle, it's just not ideal, right? It's not ideal for a woman to be living life that way. So, it essentially what happens, what I see happening is, I see people getting into these short-term relationships. And basically, okay, when people talk about avoidant attachment styles, I don't like to go down that path really, but if you think about it, like if you're a man, if you walked in on your wife having sex with another man, you would probably have attachment issues for the rest of your life. If you loved your wife, it would wreck you psychologically, right? So you'd have a very difficult time attaching to people. You'd have a difficult time trusting women in the future. But the same thing takes place when you're bouncing from city to city, or you're moving all around, or you're bouncing from social circle to social circle. And, you're just kind of like creating this pattern of getting into short-term relationships and bouncing on to another short-term relationship. Like, it's just what you've been doing. So, your ability to it's almost as if your brain rewires itself And instead of like committing to a relationship and being instantly attached and loving the person, wanting to spend the rest of your life with them, as soon as you start to feel feelings of attachment, you bounce away. Like you get the opposite feeling. Like you're like not afraid of it, but you're like repulsed by it. You're like, oh, I got to get the fuck out of here. Like this is smothering. I've got to move on. And so, you have people that are either flat broke and they have friends, but they're not really, they're not in a position where they can really afford a home and, to start a family. They're just kind of stuck in their hometowns. Or you have people running around traveling a lot. They're out and about and they have like these very relationship avoidant mentalities, I guess. It's just they're not built to be in committed relationships, right? And this is sort of what's happening globally all over the world. It's not just in the United States. There's people that are from Spain and they're, traveling to freaking China or whatever. Like it's happening everywhere, right? Like it's a global thing right now. But in general, we just don't have that stability anymore. And all the chaos that you see taking place is just a byproduct of it. And, I know like a lot of guys want to focus on really negative stuff because it's human nature to look for somebody to blame, right? You want to blame modern women. Women want to blame men. We're all just here. Like we're all just along for the ride. And these circumstances that have been thrown at us are altering our decisions. If you think about it, and the numbers, like I know a lot of people don't really pay attention to the numbers because they're irrelevant to them, but when you look at the numbers, in the 1980s, you could buy a house in the suburbs, like you could stay in your hometown and buy a house in the suburbs, and your mortgage payment would be the equivalent to like $500 a month today. Like imagine if you lived in the suburbs, you had a really nice house that you could be proud of. Your monthly mortgage payment was $500, and you're making like $3,000 or $4,000 a month, right? And you just have like a basic full-time job, like at a factory or the post office or something. You have a nice car, a nice house. You just get married and start a family. Like that's the way life was then. And everything is sort of like flipped around and changed. Like everything is different now. I think the average mortgage in the United States right now is like $2,200 a month. And that's average, that's just like an average, nothing spectacular house in the suburbs. And in order to achieve that, you have to go out there and travel. You might get lucky, and find a decent job in your hometown. But those jobs are limited. And most of those jobs are going to be really low paying. So if you want a decent house like that, you kind of have to go out there and destroy your social life, right? You no longer see your parents. You no longer see your cousins or your friends you grew up with. And you're kind of like, you have these attachment issues. It's almost impossible to develop any type of a relationship or like just to have any type of attachment to people in a city when you're like you don't know any of them, right? You move like 500 miles away. It's like you have nothing in common with these people. There's nothing intimate about it. Like they're just people that you see. You know nothing about their family lives or what they do for a living. You don't care about them. They don't care about you. And that's sort of how society is. But that's a big problem that I think a lot of people don't really take into consideration, or they don't think about it. They don't see it happening, but it is happening, right? And, there's not really... It's strange because we have all the tools to make it work. Like, it's all right here. Like, we could make it work. But for some reason, it doesn't. Like, the fabric that holds society together is still here. It's still right there. It seems like everything should work out. You go outside and everything looks like it would work. but it doesn't. You know, and I say this, I've really never spent a lot of time being single, but keep in mind, I'm in my late 30s, and, I don't have a family. I have a girlfriend. And I could, we could have a kid or two, if we chose to do that. But even so, it's strange because, like, little issues, like, if you grow up in the United States, there's things about your hometown, the high school that you went to, maybe the college you went to, the college football team you were a fan of, or there's things about where you grew up at that are unique to you and the people that you grew up as, like something that bonds all of you together. And when you're out traveling and you're just doing all sorts of things, you're going to Vegas, LA, New York, Miami, Dallas, Chicago, Seattle, whatever, you're just moving around. You don't share those same values and those same memories with any of those people. So it's like starting a family doesn't feel like the right thing to do, and that's just something about modern society that we don't have. And it's even worse because when you do go back to your hometown, nothing looks the same. It's like literally everything is different. You drive down the street and you don't recognize anything because every 5 years they completely remodel it. They tear everything down and put something else up. And, there's no stability there either, right? And that's modern society. You don't have, like, your grandpa's farm that the family goes and visits, and it's going to be part of the family for 10 generations, right? It's like that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. It's scary to think about, but, that's the modern world. That's what we live in. I don't know. Again, I don't want this to be like some sort of like a doomer video. I don't like making doomer content. It's more of just an observation. And I don't like making negative content in general or like talking trash about women or anything like that because I know there are problems, but that type of language only exaggerates the problem, amplifies the problem, normalizes the problem, right? Because if I'm constantly reacting to like how crazy modern women are or something of that nature, then that just like feeds it, right? That's the type of content people want to watch. So, you're going to have clout chasing women making videos that I can react to, and it's just like feeding the cycle and making things worse and worse. And, that's not really something I'm interested in doing, but I don't know. It's just something to think about. I wanted to talk about this subject because it's the holidays, right? Between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Dating advice, I don't think is really useful, because relationship advice I don't think is really useful because if you're somebody that's dating or in a relationship, you're probably spending the holidays with that person. You're not watching videos, right? The people that are watching the videos are like single and, they're going to find this type of content relatable. And it's true. Relationships are cool. Relationships are fun. I encourage more relationships, but they're harder and harder to find in this day and age because you essentially, you're a stranger. You're an adult who is a stranger, and you're meeting other strangers, and you get together. You go out a few times. Maybe you're really high on each other, and it's almost like you're love bombing each other, not in some narcissistic kind of way, but just in like a normal honeymoon phase, excitement is high kind of way. And suddenly something kicks in and it just kind of clicks and you realize like, maybe this isn't for me. Or maybe the person you're with realizes it's not for them and suddenly one of you pulls back, right? And the relationship just kind of falls apart. but that's because they're wired that way. That's the way modern society has made them. You know, they don't have that stability. When a man has that social stability and that professional and financial stability, the only thing he's really missing is the wife. You know, she completes him. And they get together and they start a family. When a woman has that stability, knowing who she is, right? And I know they encourage women, go out and get your degree, travel, do all of that. So a lot of women don't really want to learn how to, like, be a wife. You know, it's kind of like, they view that as like a condescending term, like housewife. It's like, it's negative. It's like she didn't make anything of herself. But men don't view women in that way. If a woman is like a good housewife, if she's just like, you know, maybe kind of quiet, happy, easy to get along with, low maintenance, you know, enjoys cooking, enjoys spending time with her kids and her husband, you know, that's all that's really asked. That's what men are attracted to. You know, a lady that can cook a Thanksgiving turkey, right? A ham. Can throw down on a holiday and decorate the house during the holidays and make things, you know, feel like home. That's the type of stability that men are attracted to in a woman. You know, a woman that has it together in that way. But we're all sort of lacking what's required for modern relationships. That's why when I see people escaping, and this is what it is, it's escapism. When you see women out there wanting to party and get drunk all the time and hook up, ride the carousel, as they say, and men want to be pickup artists, players and bad boys, and so on and so forth, it's escapism. You know, I know this because I took part in that escapism. I remember there was a time period in my life when I was in a drunken daze, hooking up with all kinds of women, drunk every day. And, you know, it really is escapism because you're not sure what you want to do with your life. And the reason why I was doing it was because my dad had passed, so I didn't feel like I had that social family stability. And I was unsure what I wanted to do with my life, right? Because he was a military guy, and I thought that's what I would be. But he died when I was 18. So, you know, that kind of changed my course. I don't know. And so, you know, I was escaping, getting drunk, traveling, going all over the place. And I know a lot of people do that, even if they're not doing it because they lost a loved one or something. They're doing it because, you know, they're living in a different city and they're going to college, or they just started a new career, and they know that everyone they grew up around, the life that they sort of envisioned themselves living, no longer exists. And they're living this new life, and they may have money, or, you know, they may be out living life, but there's still something deeper. You know, there's something missing there. Something severely unsettling about living a life like that. And it can be depressing, and people need to escape, right? So, you know, like I said, we're all in this together, and we're all just kind of reacting to the circumstances. It's not good, but, you know, what do we do? Where do we go from here? This is where we live, and this is what it's all about, right? This is life. So we just take it one step at a time, one day at a time. All right, guys. Suppose I won't ramble on anymore, but hope this video was somewhat informative. And that's about it for tonight, guys. Until next time, see ya.